I'm Ross Mayfield, investment strategy analyst at Baird, and we are back for another weekly video with our friends at Strategas. This week, we are lucky enough to grab a few minutes of time with Dan Clifton. He's the head of Washington policy research at Strategas, and we're going to pepper him with a lot of questions about DC today. So Dan, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Ross. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's jump right in because there's a lot to cover. And let's actually go back a week or two to the Virginia election. Yep. I wanted to get your opinion on what influence that had on how the two big bills in Washington are developing, and particularly the infrastructure bill, which has already passed.
That's right. I mean, how does an off-year election for governor in Virginia, New Jersey impact infrastructure and what tax increases could be in the Build Back Better agenda? But the election was very, very important. What happens in political cycles is usually a new president sees their approval rating go down, and that new president usually loses in their first midterm election. On average, the president loses about 28 House seats, and there's only two presidents in the last 100 years who've actually gained seats for their party in that midterm election, and that was FDR during the Great Depression and George W. Bush after 9/11. And so what happens is that the Virginia and New Jersey elections a year before that midterm election have actually been very good leading indicators of what's going to happen in the midterms. And we had elections in the early part of November, which give us a good window into what's happening politically. What you saw is a major wave develop in support of the Republicans after the Democrats had a big election night in 2020. So the Virginia governor's race and the New Jersey governor's race both moved 13 points from Democrat to Republican if you compare it to last election. Okay, there's a million more Democrats in New Jersey than Republicans, and the Republican candidate for governor won. The median state legislative district moved about 11.5% to Republicans, and we can take that data and extrapolate that to what it means for the midterm elections next year, and it would suggest about a 40-seat loss for the Democrats. And so that election happened, and it was a clear signal to the Democrats in Washington that their majority is at risk. Now, different people, depending on your political partisan views, interpret those elections very differently. The Democrats interpreted that election as that voters want action on legislation. And so what you have started to see is major changes to the tax increases on the Build Back Better agenda, but also immediately after the election, you saw that the House Democrats moved forward the stalled infrastructure package that was tied up for 3 months. And so the message that the Democrats received is we got to do more, and that is accelerating legislative developments here in Washington.
Yeah, you would think that would light a fire, and it seems to have. So the infrastructure bill for a long time was considered linked with the Build Back Better agenda, or at least there were some, in the Democratic Party that wanted that. They have been delinked at this point, as what I'm hearing from you. So now the focus kind of shifts, I think, to the Build Back Better plan and a lot of changes, as you've mentioned. Let's focus on the taxes. What are you seeing shifting on that front? Because I think there's a lot of updates.
Yeah, so first, look, a lot of people who make more than $400,000 a year voted for Joe Biden for president. A big portion of the Democratic base is highly educated, high-income workers, and they were facing a tax increase under the original Biden proposal and the House proposal that was put out on September 14th. What we have seen is that the politics are shifting here, given that many of those suburbs started moving a little bit more towards the Republicans, both in New Jersey and in Virginia. And in fact, there were about 6 congressional districts that are controlled by Democrats in Congress today between New Jersey and Virginia that voted Republican for governor in those 2 states. It's a pretty remarkable statement, right? So the whole idea here is to water down those tax increases. The revised Biden proposal and the revised House proposal no longer raises the top income tax rate on from 37 to 39.6%. It no longer raises the capital gains rate from 23.8% to 28.8%, and no longer lowers the estate tax exemption. Additionally, the corporate tax rate, which was going from 21 to 25%, has also been removed, and many of the other corporate tax rate changes have been delayed, which means that the earnings impact from those tax increases next year have basically gone away. And so this is a major change in tax policy. But it's not just that these taxes got eliminated. There is a replacement. A new proposal is out there to put a surtax on income. If you make $5 million and are single, or $10 million are married, they are going to put a surtax on your income. Okay, so the way this works is you pay all your income taxes, capital gains, everything, and then as soon as you're done paying, then you got to calculate all your income again. And if your total income exceeds the 5 or 10 million, depending on you're single or married, then they put the surtax on you. That rate goes up to 8% if you're making 12.5 million or 25 million single married itself. So it's a pretty big change. And what they've done is they said, we're not going to do a broad-based tax increase on high-income individuals. We're going to go find 22,000 Americans and we're going to go put the tax on them. They did the same thing on corporate. Instead of having a corporate tax rate, we're now going to have a 15% minimum tax. And so every company in the US was going to get that higher corporate tax rate. Now you're moving it to about 100 companies getting that corporate tax rate. And that's made it a little bit more politically feasible to be able to get some of these tax increases through. It's a very meaningful change. And I'll tell you just one last point, is that when we were going to raise the capital gains tax in September, the capital gains tax rate was going to be effective for September 14th. So it was going to be retroactive. Now the effective rate is January 1st on that surtax, and you're starting to see high income individuals pulling forward their income into 2021 through various different mechanisms.
So a lot of changes, and I know the CBO score is going to be important for some of the officials voting on this. What is that the next big catalyst? What should we be watching going forward from here to see where that legislation lands? And do you think it happens in this calendar year?
Excellent question. So let me start off by saying that right now we're on recess this week. Congress will come back next week. There will be enormous pressure on the House of Representatives to vote out this tax and spending bill. There's about 6 moderate Democrats in the House who want to see the full Congressional Budget Office cost estimate before moving forward on this legislation. There's a lot of pressure on them to vote for this bill without the full accounting. And so that's going to be a big fight. Our estimate is that this is about $2.4 trillion of spending and about $2.1 trillion of tax increases and other spending offsets like pharmaceutical pricing. And so what's going to happen here is that even if the House passes it, which we think will happen by Thanksgiving, you'll move it over to the Senate. The Senate is going to end up gutting this bill and doing what I call the great fiscal shrinking, bringing that bill down to about $1.7 trillion. Senator Manchin, who's a key swing vote, is very worried about the recent inflation readings and how this spending bill can contribute to that. So you are looking at a much longer process in the Senate. The Senate cannot move without a full accounting of the Congressional Budget Office. In the House, it's a bit discretionary. In the Senate, it's not. And at the same time, you have a lot more issues that you need to work through. We're going to have to fight over what the SALT deduction is. The House and Senate have 2 visions. We're going to have to modify the drug pricing provision. We're going to have to figure out if there's going to be a methane tax. And that's all in addition to whether we're going to get this size down. And so what I like to say is I'll probably be calling my mother and telling her I'll be late for Christmas Eve dinner based on the trajectory that we're going on. But I just want to give you one point of reference, Ross. In December of 2017, 4 years ago, when the Republicans were doing tax reform, it did not look like they were going to be able to get something done. But as soon as that December switch hit, you saw everybody kind of move in the direction, and Trump signed that bill December 22nd, right before Christmas. So never underestimate the pressure of holiday season in order to get members of Congress home, and it usually speeds them up. But I'd still say it's about a 60% chance of passing. We do think that it could get done this year if all the stars align for the Democrats.
Dan, you guys are the best in the business, you and your team. We really appreciate the time and the insight, and I hope you make it home for Christmas dinner. So thanks for sitting down with us.
Thanks, Russ.